Hi ladies, welcome to your module on Mind Your Mindset. So we're going to talk about fixed versus growth mindsets and positive versus negative ones. And a mindset is just talking about whether you believe qualities such as intelligence and talent are fixed or whether you believe they're changeable. And according to a brilliant Stanford psychologist, Carol Dweck, she says your beliefs play a pivotal role in what you want and whether you achieve it. Okay, so people with a fixed mindset believe that these qualities are inborn, that they're fixed and that they're unchangeable. And fixed mindsets tend to create a need for approval. So every situation requires a confirmation of your intelligence, your personality, or your character. You want to be externally validated. Situations are examined to decide whether you'll succeed or fail, or will you look smart or stupid, or will you be accepted or rejected. Fixed mindset people are more likely to give up when things get harder. Growth mindsets believe that the abilities can be developed and strengthened by way of commitment and hard work. And these people have a real hunger for learning. They've got a desire to work hard and to discover new things and to tackle challenges and to grow. They really recognise that setbacks are a massive form of growth. When they do try and fail, whatever failing means, they tend not to view it as a failure or a disappointment, but they kind of view it as a learning experience and recognise it leads to growth and change. And a growth mindset contributes to greater achievement and increased effort. So when facing a problem, such as finding a new job, say, people with growth mindsets show more resilience and they're more likely to persevere in the face of setbacks. And she found that it's your mindset that plays a significant role in determining your achievement and success. And now let's just let that sink in for a minute. Literally, how you think and your beliefs around what you are capable of is shown to correlate to your level of achievement and success. I mean, that's huge. And there's a few more bits on this diagram. It's a really, really good diagram. So fixed mindsets basically believe that your intelligence is static, which is a real concern to me because I love learning. I think increasing your intelligence is one of the most impressive things you can do with your life almost, and not for anyone else, purely for how it makes you feel. So fixed mindsets believe intelligence is static and they want to look smart, and so they have a tendency to avoid challenges, they give up easily, they see effort as worthless, pointless, they ignore useful negative feedback, and this is really important. But the thing is, with fixed mindset people, either they don't know they're doing it or they try to disguise it almost. So criticising a fixed mindset person really, really interesting. They will believe or imply that they've taken on your advice. That's not the truth. They feel threatened by the success of others, which is really, really interesting. So as a result, they'll achieve what they're going to achieve quite early in life and pretty much stay there. They might move jobs and appear to be moving along, but generally they will stay at a really similar level. And they will buy into the idea that their lot is determined almost. A growth mindset, on the other hand, obviously, is literally the opposite. So they believe intelligence can be developed, and so they want to learn. They like changes, and they continue when they're set back, which is a really important skill to learn. They see putting effort in as worth it. They understand that you have to put effort in to get what you want to achieve. They learn from their criticism. It doesn't mean they like it still, but they learn from it. And they find inspiration in the successes of others, so they like to watch other people doing well. As a result, at the end, they get higher than they expected levels of achievement, and they really understand this idea of free will, that they get to choose their life. So Carol Dweck talked about the power of yet, and this is one of my favourite concepts almost. And the interesting part is, if you have a fixed mindset, you'll disagree. we are perfectly capable of changing our mindsets. So if you watched the Know Your Noggin the Know Your Noggin module that I made, I talk about the pathways that we create in our brain. And these pathways are there by learning new things. We have to keep learning, and we have to go over and over and over our learning until it's embedded. Once it's embedded, we tend to take the path of least resistance, so the path we know the best. But the thing is, we can rewire our brain as many times as we like. We can create new pathways whenever we want. We can understand that things that are beyond our skill levels at the moment are just things that we don't know yet. Adding that power of yet on the end allows our brain to recognise that we could still achieve that if we chose to. Our brain will then work alongside us to figure it out. But there's such a huge brain difference in saying, I don't know how to play piano yet, versus I've never known how to play piano. If you want to play piano, of course. Our brain physiologically calculates those things differently, and all of that contributes towards the mindset that we have. Now, Dweck says that having a growth mindset doesn't involve believing that anyone can become anything they want with enough education and effort. Not everyone can become Mozart just because they try. A level of natural skill is recognised, that's important. But I can become a far better piano player by challenging myself and growing and practising than I could if I just believe I can't play piano. And we see this really, really easily in children. So kids at school who have a fixed mindset, they're kind of the ones who are taught they should look smart. So put your hand up, answer all the questions, have a go. I'm not saying have a go is not important, but they're taught they should look smart instead of loving learning. They become more concerned with how they're being judged and fear that they might not live up to expectations. Whereas kids who are taught to explore and embrace new experiences and challenges are far more likely to develop a growth mindset. So rather than seeing mistakes as setbacks, they're all willing to try new things and make mistakes in the name of learning and achieving their potential. The growth mindset is about living up to your possible potential. And the thing is, this potential is not really knowable. Who knows how far you can go if you set your mind to it? And people with a growth mindset believe that the effort that goes into learning and deepening your understanding and talents is worth how hard it can be along the way. And the interesting thing is, as kids, we tend to start out with a growth mindset. So when your child's tiny and they're learning new things, when they learn to walk, I talk about this one a lot, when they learn to walk and they stand up and fall down and stand up and they fall down, at no point do they kind of think, meh, forget it, I'll never learn to walk. And on the flip side, this really shows how pathways work, because you still know how to crawl. You still have that pathway burned in your brain, but once you learn a new talent or a new skill that almost feels better than the previous one, you tend to use the newer pathway. So it's unlikely that you'll crawl to work because you recognise that walking is a better talent than crawling. Just like anything we learn. Understanding things that are kind of beyond our skills, understanding that things are beyond our skills and we don't know how to yet is a totally different mindset to believing that you can't do it. Adding yet to the end of things inspires us to believe how we can achieve, and our brain works to figure that out. And we can help our kids with things like this. So instead of telling your child they're so smart when they do really, really well, start praising them for how much work they put in. You tried really, really hard at that, darling. I'm very proud. Oh, look at the colours you chose on that picture. I really like those. And praising them for not the outcome. Said that backwards. Praising them for what goes into it rather than the outcome. And if you've ever heard me talk about my children, I talk about this idea that Charlie has 2 rules in his life. I had to stick a third one in, but generally he has 2 rules in his life, and it's rule 1, be kind, and rule 2, try your best. And that's what he gets rewarded and praised for, is always doing his best. Regardless of the outcome, for me, that's completely irrelevant. And by focusing on the process rather than the outcome, we can help kids understand that their efforts, their hard work and their dedication can lead to change and learning and growth, both now but in the future. So positive versus negative mindset is a really, really similar thing as the fixed and growth mindset. And whether you like it or not, you fall into either the positive or negative mindset category. Now, you might flick between them a little bit, but in general, your kind of base level is either positive or negative. And it might not be something you're aware of. Your mindset not only determines your entire outlook on life and how you handle situations, but it impacts heavily on your health and on the type of people that you attract into your life. So, positive people will always think that this might be really, really difficult, but it's possible, I can probably do that. And they open that idea that they just leave that little door open with a glimmer of hope that, yeah, that's potentially doable. Negative mindset people will still recognise that it's potentially doable, but they will decide that it's not worth the effort. It may be possible, but it's too difficult. It's not worth putting in that effort for what I get out of it. And again, that's a really, really interesting concept, is that they recognise that it's doable, but decide not to anyway. Positive people recognise that it's hard to do, but it can be done, so it's worth doing. And this brings me to this idea, and this has so many different names, and one name you'll have heard it referred to by is the law of attraction. And that immediately coins this whole woo-woo idea, and I completely get why. But the idea of what we focus on is what we get is completely embedded in science, and not for the same reasons that you might be thinking of with law of attraction stuff. The thing is that happy, healthy people think about what they want and how to get it a lot of the time. Unhealthy, unhappy people spend a lot of their time thinking about all the things that are wrong and why they can't get any better. They will put barriers in their own way. And this idea of what we focus on, what we get, or law of attraction, or whatever you want to call it, is based on the idea that we are running patterns in our brain all the time, and our brain is filtering information all the time. It's a really, really important part of how we survive. Our brain cannot consciously notice all the information at once, so we filter it off. So the thing is, our brain will tag things based on whether they're significant to us or not. So a really easy example of this is, say you have a lucky number. The chances are you see that number far more than all the other numbers. Now, statistics show that not to be true. Research shows that not to be true. But what's happened is that number has been consciously tagged in our brain as important to us. And so that when we see that number, it's brought to our conscious mind through the filtering more than it would be otherwise. Same as when you name your child, you suddenly hear this name everywhere. Or when you get a new car and you suddenly see that car everywhere. This is the idea of what we focus on is what we get. And it's a really important concept to, I nearly said believe. The thing is, positive mindset people will believe this naturally anyway. It allows us to have the ability to choose, whereas if we're focusing on the negatives, we see them more, we see them far, far more, but it sucks us down into a cycle of believing that that's what's out there, that is everything that's out there. Someone with a positive mindset has an attitude that expects good and their desired results. And the power of positivity is immense. It can help you convert that energy into reality to some degree. And again, this is really, really interesting, that just by changing your mind changes the outcome. You don't even have to do physically that much differently. So, some negative mindsets that are hurting you that, again, we often don't even notice. And Joe's massively pulled me up on the normal one a few weeks ago. So, the normal mindset, you start looking at what's normal. Why can everyone else do that and I can't? And you start falling into a comparison. There's no such thing. No such thing as normal. There's things that people do some ways and other people do others. This normal thing is just a creation in our own head. So, comparison, it's a killer. We all know that. The idea that you have no control. this is one I hear time and time again, often in therapy for people who are very anxious or very depressed, is that they believe they have no control. They believe they're helpless, and believing we're helpless and focusing on that means that our mind has no reason to get up and get us out of it at that point. One of the very first things I do in therapy is kind of instill some hope, because you don't have control over anything. You have no control over anything that happens around you. You purely have control over what you choose to do about it. And it's moving people into that mindset that is my favourite thing to do. It's a skill that I've created and honed almost. Believing you're entitled, believing that things are fair or unfair. We read Don't Sweat the Small Stuff a while ago for our book club, and this idea that we believe things should be fair, it's not true. Nobody ever said that when we were born. And we put our own spin on what we believe is fair and unfair. But this idea that you're entitled to things is a negative mindset. I will or can never be happy. This never is a form of black or white thinking that takes away the hope. And this idea that I spoke about a minute ago about the hope, when we believe something could change, we're more likely to act on it. If we believe we never can be happy, then we have no space in our brain to try and make that better. And then we fall into the idea of it's always been like that. And this is a battle I come up against over and over again, because I refuse to believe that literally anybody has never been happy, even if it's for a small amount of time. I don't have the power to change. Again, that sort of feeds into believed helplessness, but also fake limitations, that you're putting these barriers in your own way that aren't real, they don't exist. This is a huge negative mindset that it's really hard to convince people who have this mindset to believe that they are buying into this idea that they are their illnesses. We've got zillions of examples of people who've had really horrific things happen and have been extremely successful and are healthy and happy and adjusted. But it's an easy negative mindset to fall into. And it's that idea that external control is important, whereas actually it's all about our internal stuff. And this always happens to me. These always and these nevers and these kind of finality words, I don't even know if that's a word, is about that we're selecting how we view the world, and we're not opening ourselves up to that chink of a possibility that things could be different. A negative mindset is usually very, very much all or nothing. And these definitely hurt us. But a positive mindset is just, it's immense. And through research, they've kind of found out that there are 6 main things that we can do that somebody with a positive mindset does naturally, but that we can do to start building a positive mindset. So the traits and characteristics that are associated with it. And number 1, always in almost every single study, is optimism. When I've just talked about hope, it's that idea that a willingness to make an effort and take a chance is worth it, and it might pay off. And if it does, the paybacks are greater than the risk involved. And it's always that trade-off. It's, you might do it and it's not worth it. But people with a growth mindset and a positive mindset will believe that they learned something from the experience along the way, even if it wasn't what they intended it to be. Optimism is the number 1 characteristic. And that's not like blind optimism. That's not talking about, so say something horrific. I'm not talking about burying our head, something horrific like a terminal diagnosis. That's not optimism of believing it can get better. Although there's a lot to be said for that now that I've just said it. But it's not a blind optimism is what I'm saying. It's the idea that you can still do things at that point. So having the diagnosis, that is not the end, almost. There is still some more stuff for you to go out and experience at that point. I feel like that's a bad example, but hopefully you understand what I'm getting at. So optimism's number 1. Acceptance. And this follows directly on is acknowledging that things don't always turn out the way you want them to, but that you can learn from your mistakes. Resilience. This is the number 1 skill I believe we would be best teaching our children at a young age is how to bounce back. We are going to have adversity and disappointment and failure throughout our lives. Teaching our kids and learning ourselves how we bounce back from that instead of giving up is a massive trait of people who achieve, people who are successful, people who are happy. Gratitude. I want to say this was almost a surprising one for me, and yet it shouldn't have been. Yeah, it really shouldn't have been, but I didn't expect to see it there, and I just think I fell into that category of believing that not enough studies have been done around it. But the idea of, it makes total sense, of actively and continuously appreciating the good stuff you've got. That doesn't mean you can't have rubbish stuff. It's not about being blindly overriding the crap, the other stuff, but it is about recognising that, all right, so this really bad thing's happened to me, but all these lovely things have happened to me too. And I'm dead grateful for that. I'm dead grateful my family's happy and healthy. It moves our mindset back into looking for more good stuff rather than looking for more bad stuff. Consciousness and mindfulness. So again, another one that feels like quite new agey, but shouldn't, because it's probably older than a lot of the others. This idea of spending a bit of time dedicating your mind to being consciously aware, it enhances your ability to focus. And the ability to focus is a huge trait associated with positive mindset. The idea that you can mindfully choose, you can consciously choose to shift your focus from something negative to something positive is a skill that we all have. Just some of us hone it better than others. If you don't, it's a great, great thing to go out and learn. And then the last one is integrity. So people with a positive mindset tend to have integrity. So this is kind of being honourable and straightforward and, I won't say sticking to your word, but even if you can't, being able to stand up and say, yeah, that didn't work, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Integrity implies almost a serving of other people rather than being self-serving. So these 6 things give us really, really good starting points for going out to cultivate a positive mindset for ourselves. And it's really interesting when you listen to a module like that, whether you do start recognising the areas that you tend to slide away from when things go rough. So, again, go rough. So I am generally a really positive person, but I know that my gratitude slips really, really quickly and my mindfulness slips really, really quickly when I am feeling negative. And of course I feel negative. My optimism tends to stay there and my acceptance tends to, but my gratitude and mindfulness tend to be the ones that will slip away. So they're the ones I tend to spend more time working on nowadays. So I'm going to end with something that I talk about quite a lot. It's choosing your next move. So one thing I like, an analogy that really sticks out to me, and there are many, and you can use any that suits you. But something I tend to talk about with clients is this idea that we can draw a line. And you've heard that a million times. But the fact is, we can draw a line at any single moment of any single day. What we tend to do is wait for a Monday or the 1st or a new year or a new month or whatever it is to decide to make a change. The idea, and one thing that will cultivate a growth mindset more than anything else, is that recognition that you can make a change at any single moment, and that what happened in the moment before has happened and we can't do a thing about it, but I can choose. And so for me, I imagine, and I literally close my eyes and imagine a silver thread on the floor. I don't know why, this is what goes on in my crazy head. We have a silver thread on the floor and I get to choose whether I step over it and do something differently, or I stay here on this side for a little while. And don't get me wrong, some days I will choose to wallow a little bit longer than I would on other days. And that's all right. But knowing that that silver line is there, and at any moment I can choose to step over that and deal with things differently moving forward. And I can do this 20 times a day. I can do this as many times a day as I want to. And there are so many times I've stepped over that line and within 5 minutes been back to being a miserable cow for whatever reason I was being. And once I recognise it, I get to choose again and again and again. And this is the most powerful thing for me, is that, yep, we have traits that are kind of embedded in us as children, but we're adults now, and we get to recognise whether we want to, whether we like the traits, and whether we want to keep them. And a lot of this stuff is so subconscious that until you decide to check in on your 6 traits, to check in to whether you are living the life that you want to live, we get to choose that now, and we get to choose and choose and choose again. And making a different choice allows you to look at things differently. I think Einstein said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And that applies to our thinking. If we think the same way over and over again, we will stay the same person. So just that concept of being able to draw a line and step over it at any point of the day. So I could have an argument with my darling husband and I can feel like I'm right. And so I can choose to stay on my side and back myself rather than almost decide to agree to disagree and crack on with having a lovely, happy life. Or I can be trying to eat more healthily or more mindfully or be on a diet. And I can eat chocolate and then I get to decide whether, well, that means I've sabotaged my day now, so I may as well go all out. Or whether I can recognise, okay, I ate a bar of chocolate, I'll step over my line and I will start afresh right now. It's that idea that you do not have to continue your behaviour if you don't like what it's doing for you and if it's not serving you. Okay, so have a little think about that and really have a think about how you can cultivate the 6 positive mindset traits and start noticing what negative ones you have in there. We all have them. And the more you practice noticing them, the more you can kind of get a handle on them and start changing them. All right, ladies, thanks for joining me.